Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. And be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. Ed Orgeron has confirmed what Neil Farrell confirmed yesterday, which is that the senior defensive lineman is returning to LSU. Ed Orgeron was both a guest on OTB this morning, then also had his weekly Tuesday Zoom press meeting, which he's doing right now during COVID. But here was Coach O on with Jordy and T-Bob talking about Neil Farrell's return.
Obviously, Neil's part of our family, a great young man. He had made a family decision to go home, which we honored. But he thought that everything was taken care of and he could come back. We welcomed him back. Obviously, he's going to have to do some work to get in a little better shape than he is right now. But I think that he can add some depth interior defensive line, which we need.
Okay, so there was also a question on the Zoom today. Considering, look, Neil Farrell opted out on August the 8th. You're inside of 2 weeks from your season opener. Is it realistic to think Neil Farrell is going to be in shape and ready to go when Mississippi State comes in a week from Saturday?
I don't know that. He's going to have to earn his way back. You know, there's some guys that have been busting their tail, and he's going to have to start at the bottom of the depth chart, work his way up, and let's see what happens.
So Ed mentioned he's going to have to work his way up the depth chart. Here was Ed Orgeron elaborating a bit more on the defensive line depth chart, because we're going to delve in deeper because there's a few more personnel shifts that have happened today.
Glenn Logan has been stellar. Glenn's a senior for us, been here for a while, knows what to do, is playing very well. Apu Ika has made tremendous improvement. He's in good shape. Apu's down to about 340 right now. But Joe is coming along. Joe's electric, coming out of his hips, makes some plays. Jacqueline Roy's making some progress there. I think Jacqueline is going to be an outstanding defensive line for us. And then added Neil Farrell there to already with Jacoby Gilly, Eric Taylor, and Sonny Fanu. We got a lot of players, but we're going to need every one of them.
Okay. To put this into perspective, Ed did mention a lot of guys there. He mentioned Logan, Ika, Evans, Roy, Guillory, Taylor, Fanu. That's 7. Then you add Neil Farrell, that's 8. So 8 interior players. Let me put this into perspective. Glenn Logan, and by the way, I am excited to see if Glenn Logan can stay healthy this year, because a year ago at this time, if you remember, Ed Orgeron named Glenn Logan a starter. And that caught a lot of people off guard because you knew Tyler Shelvin was going to be your starting nose tackle, and you knew Rashard Lawrence was going to be one end. We all assumed that Braden Fehoko was going to be the other. Well, Glenn Logan started the season at the end opposite Rashard Lawrence. And Ed raved about Glenn Logan last year at this time. Then Glenn got injured in that Texas game. He was one of the handful of players that got injured in the Texas game and just struggled to fight his way back and ended up playing more of a limited role throughout the course of the season. But I think Glenn Logan can be a really good player. But we've talked about this. Logan, Ika combined last year for fewer tackles than Neil Farrell. Joe Evans was playing offensive line a week ago. Jaquelin Roy, Jacoby and Guillory, and Eric Taylor are all freshmen. And Sonny Fanu has never taken a snap at the Division I level. So Neil Farrell, by a landslide, is your most experienced and accomplished defensive lineman. So you can say he needs to work his way back up, and maybe there's some validity to that he has to work his way back into shape, but there's no question 92's back, you're going to have him on the field. You can say we got to make him earn it so you're not discouraging the other guys, but he's going to earn it. Now, the other part is with Farrell coming back, we also learned today that they lost another defensive lineman, 9, Brain, if you could. This was Ed Orgeron talking about Nelson Jenkins, as the report today, Tuesday, from Go 24/7 was that Nelson Jenkins had opted out, which Ed Orgeron confirmed.
Yeah, I think it has to do with school. You know, obviously, if they opted out and coming back to school and getting back into school, I think that's the biggest deal right there. Whether it can be a full-time student or not, I think that would present a deadline. With Nelson Jenkins, as far as I know, he told us he was opting out. He's not with the football team right now, and that's all I know. I haven't had contact with Nelson in at least 2 weeks.
Okay, so Nelson Jenkins has been out for 2 weeks. The beginning of that answer was a question I asked, and Ed was talking about the deadlines for opting out. So apparently it corresponds with the school semester. Anyway, if they could be a full-time student still. Nelson Jenkins, remember, is a guy that signed in 2018, was a top 30 defensive linemen in the country out of Plaquemine. He played in one game as a freshman in 2018 against Rice, had one tackle. Didn't play a snap last year. So it's one of those guys that we talk about often where if you're at a place like LSU and you get into year 3 and you haven't cracked the rotation, chances are it won't happen. There are exceptions. Lloyd Cushenberry started for the Denver Broncos last night. He was a guy that waited until his 4th year to play at LSU, started for 2 years, was awesome, became a 3rd-round draft pick or 4th-round draft pick of the Broncos, and started the first game of his NFL career. That happens. Garrett Brumfield waited his turn till he was a 5th-year senior, got his chance to play. Awesome. That's also an exception. Nelson Jenkins signs with LSU, only plays one game as a freshman. Then a year ago, doesn't play when guys like Apu-Ika come behind him as a true freshman and do play. And now he's behind a sophomore in Ika, 2 freshmen in Guillory and Roy, and Joe Evans, who's only been playing defensive line for a week after spending the last year at offensive line. So Jenkins is a guy who had obviously been knocked far down the depth chart and wasn't really going to be an impact guy. But like we talk about, it's a body. And whenever you really get thin on bodies, you need, it's why rosters have 85, man. It's why those limits are what they are, because you got to have depth, because injuries happen and opt-outs happen and transfers happen, and you need bodies. And so that's where that may hurt. But if you ask me today, would I trade Nelson Jenkins for Neil Farrell? In a heartbeat, 100 times out of 100. Your most experienced defensive lineman for a guy who played in one game in 2 years, that's an easy trade if it has to go that way. Now, there have also been whispers about Tyler Shelvin and Ed Ogeron. 5, Brain, please. Ed Ogeron did address this today with the rumors about Tyler Shelvin potentially opting back in.
You know, we hear rumblings. His family has called me, and I know people are talking to him. I have not spoken to Tyler. I think some of his teammates are talking to him, but there's not been a decision yet. He hadn't. The only time to make a decision is to call me, and we take him back, obviously, and we want him back. I don't know where he's at in his mind. If he doesn't want to come back, obviously, we wish him the best. If he wants to come back, like any member of our family, we'll take him back.
It's obvious if that guy wants to come back and play, you take him. A potential first-round talent, despite the fact that he's had his issues, and Ed Ogeron loves Tyler Shelvin. I mean, there's no question about that. He's talked about it a lot. He recruited him as a defensive line coach and wants him part of this program and really could use a dominant force like that in the middle. But I also think it's misleading to... You can pluck out any part of that quote from Ed Ogeron and slap it as the headline, like Shelvin's family's reached out to Ogeron. And that is part of the answer. But Ed Ogeron also said he's not had any conversation with Tyler. And ultimately, Tyler would have to come back to Ed Ogeron to get back on the team, and he hasn't done that. And Ed's had no contact with him. And the conversations that I've had, like we talked about on Monday, the Neil Farrell news was not altogether surprising. LSU was on Neil for a couple of weeks about trying to get him back into the program, and it worked out. Tyler, it feels a little bit more like a long shot. I would never say never, because dealing in absolutes, especially when you're talking about the whims of teenagers and young guys in their early 20s, that's foolish. So who knows what may happen, but it feels like Shelvin being back would be a long shot at this point. But getting Neil Farrell back is a massive boost for LSU. One more thing that Ed Ogeron said that to me was his comments about COVID got a lot of attention, and certainly opt-ins and the opt-outs. But there's one more thing that Ed Ogeron said today. And he was talking about the scrimmage from Friday, and he brought up the defense and how the defense won the first scrimmage, the offense won the second scrimmage, but mostly he was talking about the defense and where they are right now under Bo Pelini compared to where the defense was a year ago. Give a listen.
We are so much better on defense right now than any part of the season last year. I feel with Bo Pelini has come in, he's brought a new energy, a new excitement. The 4-3, Dave Aranda did a tremendous job for us, but I'm just glad that we moved to the 4-3. We're more of an attacking style of defense. We're using our personnel, and Bo's done a tremendous job for us.
Brain, can you play just the very beginning of that again? Because there's a point I want to make.
We are so much better on defense right now than any part of the season last year.
Thank you. We are so much better on defense right now than at any point last year. I want to point something out to you. LSU had first rounder in Caleb Von Chasson, first rounder in Patrick Queen, guys that started their NFL debut in Jacob Phillips, Christian Fulton. Grant Delpit was certainly on target to do that until he unfortunately got injured. But again, you had a consensus All-American in the defensive backfield. You had Derek Stingley, who was an All-American as well. Rashard Lawrence, who started his debut as well for the Cardinals. And Ed Orgeron said, we are so much better right now than at any point last year. Let me remind you, LSU down the stretch beat Texas A&M 50-7 in Baton Rouge. 50-7. And the 7 that A&M got was kind of junky in the second half. A&M threw for 97 yards, rushed for 72, put up 169 yards of total offense in that game. Then LSU went to Atlanta for the SEC championship game and beat Georgia 37-10. And Georgia didn't get in the end zone until the fourth quarter. Made Jake Fromm look very pedestrian as Georgia put up a total of 286 yards. Again, a lot of garbage time yardage. Then they played Oklahoma in the college football playoff semifinal. And Jalen Hurts and the Sooners put up 28 points. But Jalen Hurts was 15 of 31 for 217 yards and a pick. It wasn't even that close. And then we all remember what LSU's defense did to Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and that high-powered Clemson offense in the national championship game, basically holding Trevor Lawrence to the worst game of his career. And 18 of 37 in that ball game. Less than 50% completions. And Ed Orgeron said today that his defense right now is so much better today than they were at any point last year. With a slew of first-rounders and NFL starters that throttled 3 consecutive top 10 teams and A&M. And they're so much better right now than at any point last year. Remains to be seen. But if you don't think Ed Orgeron was aching to move to a 4-3, let that be the cold bucket of water dumped right on top of your head. That defense at the end of the year last year was incredible. Oozing talent. And one more time, Brain, what did Ed Orgeron say again today?
We are so much better on defense right now than any part of the season last year.
So much better on defense right now than at any point of the season last year. If that's true, remains to be seen if it is. But if that's true, this could be one of the best LSU defenses ever. Because that defense at the end of the year last year was dominant. With NFL starters running all over the field. Let's see what they got. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.